Welcome to Filmstrip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504(c)(2), Title 17.
Welcome to Filmstrip. I'm Jay.
I'm Ron.
I'm Kurt.
We're here to talk about Minority Report, starring Tom Cruise, Samantha Morton, Max von Sydow, Neil McDonough, Catherine Morris, and Colin Farrell. Based on the novella by Philip K. Dick, written by Scott Frank of Logan fame and John Cohen, an author himself, directed by Steven Spielberg and released in 2002, a big summer hit. Part of an interesting time for Spielberg when he was doing some darker sci-fi, if you will. I mean, he did AI, which was a collaboration with his late friend Stanley Kubrick, and ended up finishing that up, and then Minority Report, and then he would team up with Tom Cruise again to do a remake of War of the Worlds a couple of years later. But we're here to talk about the Minority Report, and I want to get you guys backgrounds with this one. So Kurt, I want to start with you because you and I have had conversations about this movie for I feel like 10 years behind the scenes, and we're finally getting around to doing it. But what's your background with not only this movie but also the Philip K. Dick novella?
When I went into this movie, I would have been on DVD. I didn't see it in the theater in 2002. I don't know why, because when I look back, I'm like, I don't know why. That is so my cup of tea. I don't know why I didn't want to go see it in the theater. But anyway, I saw it on DVD probably that fall, whenever it would have come out. And I knew what it was about, basically. The trailers tell you, predicting murders in the future or something like that. And I don't think I even knew. I don't think I knew until it was over that it was a Spielberg movie. And I really, really, I liked it. I thought it was great. I thought it was confusing, and yet I was able to follow it and all these things. And but then it kind of came and went, and I don't think I saw it again for like a couple years. And then it was one of those movies like I threw it on again, and I was like, this is better than I remember. And then it was like a year or two later, I threw it on again, and it's gone like that for the last like 10, 15 years. Like I just, every time I'll pop it on again, I'm like, and the more I watch it, I'm like, this is really something. This is something for Spielberg. This is something for Tom Cruise. This is a hell of a piece of work here. And as for the novella, I have not read.
What about you, Ron?
I think this is another HBO special. I don't remember going to see it at the movie theater or anything, but I've watched it several times because it's got people I really like in it. So, not a very interesting background for this one either, but I'm pretty sure that I've read the short story because I went through a Philip K. Dick phase in like early high school, but I couldn't tell you anything about it either. So I may as well have just lied and said I never read it, but I know I have.
I probably have the deeper background with this one than anybody. I saw it in theaters when it came out because it just looked like the kind of thing I would dig. And I thought, okay, Spielberg's doing some action sci-fi with Tom Cruise now. Let's go try this out. And what's funny is I walked out of the theater going like, I don't know if I like that or not, and then I ended up watching it on HBO or whatever sometime later. And I thought, I don't know if I really like that or not. And so I just kind of walked away from it. And sometime later, really before Filmstrip became a thing, I was working for Venganza Media, the home of Now Playing Podcast, and they were doing a Philip K. Dick series leading up to The Adjustment Bureau, if y'all remember that. And I was editing those shows, and so I said, you know what, I'm going to like deep dive all these. So I started reading all of the stuff, and I read the short novella. I mean, it's a short read, depending on which version of it printed you get. It can be 70 pages, or if it's they're truly stretching it out, it can be 120, but it's not much. It's a quick read. And I remember doing that, and then I remember editing that show for them and thinking, man, these guys saw a different movie than I did because I still don't like this movie. And so it's one of those that I've had a complicated relationship with because it's got so much stuff in it that I should like. It's got a lot of actors in it I like. It's got a lot of the kind of stuff I go for in a sci-fi action kind of movie and dystopia. And it's got a lot of the heart of the Philip K. Dick story. in it, but there's something about it that I don't know. I just always bump up against, and maybe we can unpack it a little bit here, but we won't spend a ton of time going through the story. I mean, there's a lot of differences in it, but there's a lot of the same bullet points. I'm not one of those people that gets real twisted when they take a book or a story like that and then stretch it into a full movie. You're fine to translate, one medium to the next. And with Philip K. Dick stuff, a lot of times it is just a short story. Most of the stuff is really, you got to fill in the blanks unless you're doing like a TV show.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if this would have been. I think I would Philip K. Dick stuff. It's like I think I would have seen Total Recall. I
Yeah.
saw that, and then I would have seen this, and then it wasn't for like another couple years that I would have seen Blade Runner, and then A Scanner Darkly.
Yeah.
But it's like it's one of like in retrospect when you watch all of his or like well I guess if you read all of his books or the movies based on his book, then you really the themes are really evident. So a lot of stuff about being observed and a lot of stuff of hating the government and hating cops.
Yeah. There's a lot of paranoia in Philip
Yeah,
K. Dick,
paranoia.
and some of it is fueled by his own personal quirks, and a lot of it's fueled by drugs. I mean, that's
Yep.
not. I'm not slandering the man. I mean, it's just real. But it was from a time period too, and we have to think like this movie was published in the 50s. It was in the Cold War and in post World War II America, and what was that going to look like? And the world was changing very, very rapidly. Our world changes rapidly today in the 2020s, but back then it was doing the same, and he was reacting to it in the way that an artist does. He's just reflecting on it. Like, what does this mean? Like, what if we have all this unlimited technology and power, and we're giving a lot of power over to this military industrial complex? Is that a good idea? And it's I don't know. That's the big theme of the book is there's no difference in the Max von Sydow and the Tom Cruise characters. They're really the same person in the book, and the guy's paranoid that somebody is trying to take his job from him, and it turns out he's right because the army is being made obsolete by the idea that, well, if we can predict all crime, well, what do you need an army for? And those guys don't like that. And so, and the Whitmer character's a little different, but anyway, I can talk about it when we get to the bigger, broader points of what's different. But again, the bullet points are the same and the idea is the same. And what I find interesting about this is Steven Spielberg tackling this kind of subject because it's not above him to do things that are sort of hard to talk about. Coming out of the 90s, he had done Schindler's List and had done Saving Private Ryan and, a lot of these kind of movies that are some difficult subject matter, right? But then to go back into sci-fi, where he had spent some time with Close Encounters and E.T. and in some ways Poltergeist, like his production work on that is a little sci-fi along with horror, if you want to say. He had explored these ideas, but it's always fun to think about like, well, what's Steven going through personally at this moment? Because a lot of times that drives his movies. But at this point, he was just pretty much a happy married dude. So I don't know. He just wanted to do some dark sci-fi, I guess.
Yeah, it's it is weird because it's like because I'm like the movie and I think it's really good. But whenever I think about what made Spielberg want to do it, that's where I'm like, I have no idea because it's so not a Spielberg type movie. It's not an optimistic movie. It doesn't. It's one of his most pessimistic movies as far not counting his historical films. I get into that kind of a horror. It's probably his darkest. I would say it's probably his darkest movie, not counting stuff based in history.
The only thing I would say is War of the Worlds goes a little bit darker because there's some
Yeah.
real, but it's in the same vein. Like AI takes a real sharp turn, and maybe it is just the subject matter and the things he's involved with here. And it's kind of why we're doing this now. We're taking these movie adaptations of these well-known sci-fi authors who also had a lot of dystopia and nihilism sort of sprinkled in here. This Starship Troopers, iRobot, all from three big names in the genres, but the interpretations of those works take on a whole different life, and that's what's interesting to me. And, I kind of talked about how Philip K. Dick writes a lot about paranoia and really honed in on a lot of that. And I think in its core, a lot of that is still here too. But the social commentary of this is what's interesting because, as we'll find out, and he's talked about it a lot, people talk about this movie being like prophetic for all the future tech it got right. And it's not prophetic as much as it's Steven Spielberg hired a bunch of people from MIT who were doing research and a bunch of economists and criminologists and brought them in, and he he did what he called one of his think tanks, and they just spent a week, imagine like an academic conference, just talking about stuff they were working on and what it might look like, because he wanted to have a future that could seem so real that people didn't get lost in that and didn't like hang on to every bit of the future tech. They just felt like it could be, So that's why I always laugh at like oh, this movie's so prophetic. I'm like, no, it's just well researched, as most
Yeah.
Spielberg things are.
Yeah. Every time I remember when I first saw that it was in the DVD talking about that think tank. I'm always like, man, I wish they filmed that, because I
Right.
wonder what else they got into, because that's the thing, whatever they got into, like these are like, it was the people that were like I don't know if they were directly involved in making these decisions, but whatever it is, they made a lot of correct guesses about the world, and I'm sure there was a ton of other stuff that this movie doesn't explore that they did talk about that also probably came true.
Yeah, I would love to have sat around in that room just for a couple of days just to hear some of it. Because again, they were talking about things that they were actually working on at the time
Mhm.
to see if it could work. Not so much like, can we predict crime, but how do we take all this surveillance footage and manipulate it with
Yeah.
gloves and, having manipulative computer interfaces, and the idea that advertising would become very centralized to you, which is a little bit in the Philip K. Dick story, but it's mostly like you get scanned everywhere you go. And
Mhm.
now, I mean, think about it. Like you open your phone with your face, I mean, like that. But we've been working on that for years. That's what's neat about it, is so you can say, oh, it's prophetic. But really, no, it's just, again, it's well researched. It's that no, people have taken those ideas, and good sci-fi has led to a lot of scientific exploration through the years. We've talked about that on the Star Trek series. Nate and I have, about the times when they've kind of gone back and looked at sort of seminal moments in human history, and what Star Trek tried to lean into with that. And it's all based in some bit of reality of people who want to explore and change things for the better, and or want to do exploration and research. And so when it comes to fruition, it's because, well, they grew up watching and reading this shit, and so they're still into it. I mean, it's not what's wild about it. What's interesting is that you hook all that to Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise in 2002 is a different kind of movie star that he is now. And I don't know, Ron, like, where are you with Cruise just in general? Because I don't think we've ever talked about him much, aside from just things offline and everything. But he's coming out of Eyes Wide Shut and, kind of getting into the Mission Impossible phase, but he's also kind of stopped chasing Oscars at this point and is just going to do movie star stuff.
I feel like this is the beginning of like where Tom Cruise stops being an actor and starts just being Tom Cruise. And that's not a slight. He
Mhm.
is the last surviving movie star.
Yeah.
He's still a movie star. And no matter what happens with these last couple of Mission Impossible movies, he's probably going to stay a movie star until he decides it's time to chase Oscars again. Um, it's a really interesting team up, I think, him and Spielberg, because he plays so well as like a kind of a populist everyman type of dude. He seems like the kind of guy that's like tailor made to be in a Spielberg movie, because he just looks like, you know, he looks like he should be the hero in a movie. And Spielberg, for all of his creativity and all of his instincts, like he doesn't usually get to play with those sorts of people, because I can't think of like many Spielberg movies that are like, oh, this is a capital M movie star in a Spielberg movie, right?
Like he's minted a lot of them, yeah, but he doesn't necessarily have them out of the
Yeah,
gate.
he makes them, they just don't show up ready made. And this is like a
Yeah.
case of where
Like,
here's a dude who is already well on his way to being a capital M movie star.
I mean, I think Tom Hanks was by the time that Spielberg started working with him, but Tom Hanks is definitely like that. If Tom Cruise is the everyman, he's the athletic younger brother everyman of Tom Hanks's everyman. Like that's what he is as far
Well,
as being a movie star.
now I just want a movie with the two of them together.
Right. I'm surprised that hasn't happened. The Tom and Tom show, like that. That could have been fun, especially a few years ago. But yeah, I don't know. I you're right though. I think this is the part where Tom Cruise decides, I'm just going to work with interesting people and I'm just going to do what I want to do anymore. I think he did a couple more Beatty things after this. I mean, like Oscar Beatty type things, beyond this, but he's mostly just been a huge movie star and
Well,
is
he
fine
did.
with that,
Well, he did like he did Valkyrie after this, right?
Yeah, but even that is like a
Yeah, but
cheesed up historical drama.
yeah, but he got to wear an eye patch.
Yeah,
So I think he
yeah.
was.
He
So I
did get
think
to
he
wear an
was
eye
just.
patch.
I think he was just like, I would do a movie where I wear an eye patch,
Yeah, I would.
but I don't want to be a pirate because that's Johnny Depp's thing.
Yeah, that's Johnny Depp's thing. He did Lines for Lambs, which is this drama about war and stuff and politicians, but I don't think anybody cared about it. I mean, this is the same period. I mean, he did this, War of the Worlds. He did Collateral, which I think is an incredible Michael Mann film. The three of us talked about Heat once upon a time, and Collateral is a longer down the line spiritual sequel of all that world, but it's an incredible performance too. And I think a side entry in the Transporter series. I understand now. 'Cause I think that character has been confirmed. Like, nope, that's the Transporter. When he sharps off the gun or whatever at the beginning of it. But yeah, I mean, I've never had an aversion to Tom Cruise in any era that he wanted to be in. I think because I grew up with him. Like he was just I grew up seeing Top Gun and Days of Thunder and all that stuff, and then I saw like all the right moves and Risky Business because I had an older brother that was his age range of things, and so I got to see all that shit. And so I've always thought of Tom Cruise as a movie star. Like it's not weird for me. It's always odd for me to see him to try to not be the movie star, to try to be something else, And I don't know that he's ever really done it except maybe once. That Tropic Thunder performance where he's the angry the studio executive is one of the funniest things he's ever done. But
Oh,
you
it's
realize
incredible.
yeah, but people are always like, you should do more of that. And he's even said, he's like, that was a once in a life character, y'all. Like that just doesn't come along every day. Because people don't pitch that kind of stuff to him, and who knows all the layers you have to go through to get there, or thetans, whatever you want to call it, to get to it at this point to him.
I
But
mean, how often do you get to be Joel Silver on screen?
right, exactly, yeah, or Joel Silver mixed with a little bit of Don Simpson, I think is what that's
Yeah, I
supposed
think
to
it was
be.
Don Simpson.
Yeah,
Either
there's
way.
definitely something, and he would know because he was there, so during a lot of that. But it's also like that's a kind of a sidebar with Tropic Thunder. That's a good McConaughey understated performance too, where he's getting to be kind of a funny, jerk. But I digress on that. But I guess before we get any further into this, guys, we should do a plot summary, and I'll try to hit the bigger points of this so that we can just get into the movie proper. And because I got questions, like I said, you two seem to like this, so I want to see if you can convince me and turn me over to your side.
Hang on, Jay. Before you get started, let's all climb into our bath full of weird milk and put on our um, scaly jumpsuit things.
I mean, that is a there's something very like 1990s speed skating outfit about the precog outfits that I'm gonna have to. Kate, Kurt, you're the Canadian. You know all those winter sports. Please help us understand this stuff. But
It works. That's why they use it. 'Cause
it's
works.
clearly it does something. So, but what is that something? Well, it's Washington, D.C. in 2054, where a specialized police department known as Pre-Crime uses a trio of psychics known as the Precogs to predict crimes before they happen, specifically murder. Led by Captain John Anderton, played by Tom Cruise, the unit arrests would-be murderers moments before they commit their crimes, but they have to race against the clock to do this because the visions provide everything but the damn address. So they actually still have to do some police work. It's kind of wild. Anderton, though, is also haunted by the unsolved abduction of his young son, Sean, and he treats himself every evening to a round of RoboCop 2 Nuke and watching home videos of this. In spite of that, though, and the pesky presence of federal agent Danny Whitwer, who has serious doubts about Pre-Crime, played by a very young Colin Farrell, Anderton remains a staunch believer in the system's infallibility because his mentor, Lamar Burgess, played by Max von Sydow, is the mastermind, or at least one of them, behind the thing. That all changes, though, when Anderton finds himself accused of a future murder. The precogs foresee that Anderton will kill a man named Leo Crow, whom he's never met, within the next 36 hours. Stunned and confused and now running against the clock, Anderton flees, hoping to prove his innocence and understand why he would commit such a crime. He seeks out Dr. Iris Heinemann, one of the creators of pre-crime, who reveals that the existence of a minority report, an alternate prediction that sometimes occurs when the precogs disagree. These discrepancies are usually suppressed by the system or seen as just an echo of the crime and erased. So, in order to obtain his potential minority report, Anderton infiltrates pre-crime headquarters, gets in the weird milk bath, and kidnaps Agatha, the most gifted of the precogs. With her help and some fancy new eyes from Dr. Peter Stormare, who looks like he works in the same clinic Jack Nicholson's Joker went to in the Tim Burton's 1989 film, Anderton locates Crow and discovers that Leo Crow is part of a setup orchestrated to make him appear guilty and to also protect the infallibility of pre-crime before it goes national. When he finally confronts Crow, the man confessed to just being hired to play victim in exchange for financial security for his family and intended to have Anderton kill him, who he initially resists, but Crow's able to grab the gun and make it go off, so the vision is fulfilled. Anderton's ultimately arrested and imprisoned, but his wife, Laura, his strange wife, I should say, talks with Lamar Burgess and realizes that, yes, indeed, there is a conspiracy afoot. Whitwer is killed after realizing Anderton was indeed framed. And Laura uses Anderton's old eyes that were just laying around in a freezer somewhere to break him out of prison, and the two go on the run to prove his innocence and expose the conspiracy. They discover the real mastermind behind this is dun, 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 Max von Sydow, Lamar Burgess. Years earlier, Burgess murdered a woman named Anne Lively, who was Agatha's mother, to protect the secrecy of pre-crime's flaws, and specifically the existence of minority reports. He ensured her murder was hidden by staging it to look like an already prevented crime, thus erasing the evidence. When Agatha's vision of her mother resurfaced during Anderton's investigation, it threatened to expose everything. In the climax, Anderton broadcast the truth about Burgess's crimes during a public ceremony, and faced with arrest or the collapse of pre-crime, Burgess ultimately chooses to take his own life. The scandal results in the dismantling of the pre-crime program, and the precogs are retired to a quiet, undisclosed location where they can live out peacefully, free from exploitation. Anderton reconciles with his estranged wife, Laura, and begins a new life, free of the system he once believed in so fiercely. And that is the plot summary for Minority Report. We'll get into it as we go in a little deeper here, fellas. But first, I want to start with just the premise of this idea of the precogs, pre-crime, the idea that there are these people who can foresee murder and that there's an entire police force that's been around for decades now solving these crimes like this. How does that land for you guys?
Well, it's funny how it lands for me, because I was thinking there's so much about it. It's the first 15 minutes of this movie. I've heard a few people that say, even if they don't like the movie, they love the first 15 minutes because of, and one thing, it's what Spielberg does in the first 15 minutes is, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, should have got an Oscar for that, because he has to on screen depict one of the most baffling, confusing, hard to follow concepts ever done in screen history. But you wouldn't know it because Spielberg somehow manages to make it very accessible. And it probably only works when you have, $150 million budget to use those visual effects to show you everything that you need to. Nothing is left up to the imagination except for certain what if concepts. But what he does in that 15 minutes of giving you the little short film about a guy who wants to kill his wife, all while showing these cops doing what they do and explaining it as they're doing it, which is usually cinematic poison when it's over exposition. But Spielberg manages to make that entertaining, and he hits you with it so fast that you don't have a lot of time to think about the ins and outs of the morality of it until the very end of it, when all of a sudden they say, oh, by the way, we're also going to arrest this guy and lock him up without a trial after we catch him.
It's easy to give a lot of credit to Spielberg, right? Because we all know he's brilliant. He's just a phenomenal filmmaker. But what struck me the most on watching it again this time is, in that opening 15 minutes, just watching the way Tom Cruise moves his arms
Yeah, all that hand movement stuff.
Yeah, with the classical music in the background, it's almost like he's conducting,
Hmm.
but his movements are so sharp. Like you know, I'm assuming that there's nothing he's looking at while he's waving his arms around. I'm assuming that's all like put in after the fact. But man, it looks great. It looks like he's actually like moving things across like a haptic screen. It's
That's
really impressive.
that's part of the outgrowth of that think tank thing. One of the purveyors of that kind of technology that actually brought it to life and brought it to market told Spielberg and company this is how that would look and how you would manipulate items in a digital format. And they brought in that guy and a bunch of mimes to teach Tom Cruise how to move his hands and arms that way so that it did look like he was conducting an orchestra. I'm glad you picked up on that because it was something they said. They said it should look like he's conducting a symphony, and that it needs to be that precise. And he needs to imagine, I want to put that picture up here in the far right so I don't lose it, so I can keep it here. Because we got to think in 2002, guys, who had two screens, right? You had your screen was the size
Nobody.
of a damn television, at that point. So now, like we all you have, I'm sitting here looking at dual screens right now, recording this thing, and it's no big deal. But at the time, that would have just blown people's mind.
Yeah, that's it's interesting talking about the visual effects in that sequence of that screen are so good. It is it's easy to forget that he's not actually controlling a screen, but because the effects are so finely tuned, just that little bit where he's the merry-go-round where he's going like just that rotating back and forth is just like it just looks so it's just because it looks so real because that's what because the think tank told him it would look like, and the effects people and Tom Cruise managed to create that out of nothing.
And part of that is I want to give credit to John Cohen and Scott Frank, the writers here, who are taking concepts in a short story that are given like a sentence or two, and then bringing them into this full life with around technology that they know is being invented and worked on. And Spielberg said, all he's doing when he's moving the little timeline thing, he's just shuttling through a timeline. He said, when you're editing film, you're just backing it, forward and backward. He said, we've all seen that done, and it's done for a lot of different effects in movies. In the edit process, he said, so we just sort of treated it the same way. And he said, Tom's been in enough edit booths. He knows what that looks like. He said, so we just shot stuff that we realized, like, okay, if we joggle it back and forth, that's what it's going to look like, and I'm fascinated by the ideas being put forth here, and the fact that they couch it all in this Danny Whitmer character from Colin Farrell's point of view is that he's this federal agent who's come in because pre-crime's about to go national, and he's super skeptical of it because he doesn't believe in this idea that you can arrest people for crimes they think about. They haven't done them yet. How do you know they're going to do it? And he and Cruz have that whole thing where he rolls the ball off and he catches it, and he's like, the fact that you caught it doesn't mean that it wasn't going to fall. And this whole idea of what's predestined, what's free will, and all that. That's in the story and in the Philip K. Dick story, and the way that they lay all that out here. I'm with you, Kurt. It's one of the leanest 15 minutes to lay out all this stuff, and it's a great way to give the audience an avatar. And it's this thing that I've always held on to this movie is that the very beginning of it, the setup of it is incredible, and it really does hook you early because the visuals look great and the idea is great. And we see this guy who's being cheated on by his wife. She's rushing him out the house as fast as she can. He comes back in, catches him in the act, and then he's gonna like go scissors class on her. You're like, and in some way, you're like, I don't know, man. I've seen cheaters. I kind of can believe it.
Yeah, the storytelling in that opening is it's just like because you open with the very opening image is just somebody being killed with a pair of scissors and saying, I'm blind without them, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it gives you all these completely random images, and then over the course of that sequence, he gives you those images again in chronological order when the guy says it, so you can feel a sort of countdown. Like as they're going through a countdown, you feel it. You're seeing that countdown unfold as each image actually takes place. You're running out of what's you can feel that running at that sense of that ticking clock is so well done. And yeah, the sort of the like having it be a guy catching someone in bed with his wife. They could, because they could have made that anything. They could have made that a liquor store robbery. They could have made that they could have made that anything involving a random homicide or something. But they make it something that people in the audience, if they're not 100% sympathetic, they're at least like, yeah, I could see that. Of like that would drive you insane, and that would make, I mean, and it's so well shot. Just that shot of the when the wife is with the guy and she closes the door has a mirror on it, and he's just standing there watching him. And then they have it where he's like literally breaking down and huddles next to the bed as they start going at it on the bed. And then he picks up the scissors and is about to do it right as Tom Cruise busts in and stops him as the alarm goes off. But yeah, it's like that whole, like I said, that whole little mini infidelity story in the middle of this insane high, $100 million effects and crime exposition and psychic stuff. It's as good as it gets for that kind of a sequence.
Then there's the idea too of how the precogs work, and I wanted to toss that to you, Ron, as we're thinking about it. Is just they leave a little bit of the traces of how they're in the book, their mutations from like decades of drug addicts, that came to rise after the nuclear apocalypse and stuff. And they realized that these folks like develop psychic powers because of it. And then in true American fashion, we found a way to exploit it. We couldn't sell it, so we used it for, the government. And they've held on to some of that here with them. But I wanted to kind of toss it to you as the idea of the whole setup of how they're done. Because in the book, they're like sitting in chairs and they're talking into computer microphones. So this whole milk bath and all that, speed suits and all that stuff, that's totally for the movie.
I feel like it makes it more cinematic. I feel like there's a certain expectation that we have as film watchers of dystopian futures, and I feel like if they were literally just like hang like later the tour guide later on the thing is like, if they've got their own private rooms and they've got their own private gyms, I feel like if they had it too good, we wouldn't feel any sympathy for them. And I feel like the whole point is you have to make them sympathetic characters. They have to feel, trapped and manipulated and abused by the very same system that they are being forced to work to uphold, so to speak. Which, interestingly enough, ties back into Philip K. Dick's general dislike of government and law enforcement and people who sell him bad drugs.
Yeah, those three things are an odd Venn diagram, but they are definitely things Philip K. Dick hated. The government, the cops, and bad drug dealers. They all kind of fit in the same circle. But I do like that you can see them and you see that they are obviously in pain as part of this process. Like it's not easy for them to feel the shock of it, but they have that guy in there who's basically they're just go like, no, they're totally fine. Like he's got them in like almost like an aquarium, and it's
and drugged up.
Yeah, because they're keeping them sedated so that they can handle the visions better. And you're like, that's awful. Like the worst thing you can do for the child of a drug addict parents is give them more drugs. Like, in fact, you have to be very careful what drugs you can give them.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear that while their drug cocktails are clearly closely monitored because they can't sleep too much, otherwise they won't wake up in time to catch future crimes. But they can't be, kept awake forever because their brains would explode or whatever happens when you stay awake too long.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they can't function like that for all time. So there's an exploitative nature to this, and that's why I think it's neat the way, and it's a good performance by Colin Farrell. I have to say, I know at this time in his life he wasn't exactly like having it together and things, but he's given a hell of a performance in this, and really up against some heavyweights in these scenes. And I love the way he picks apart and the back and forth he has with Cruise in this, and you don't know whose side to be on. You know, like you want to be on the hero side because that's Tom Cruise. He's Captain America and all that stuff, right? Because he just always is. But then you're going, but this Whitwer guy, like he's not a pain in the ass. He's actually asking decent questions.
Yeah, Colin Farrell is he's exceptional in this. Remember the first time I saw it, I just like you're supposed to hate the guy at first, like he's a he's because he comes off as a dick. But yeah, it's when you look at it on paper, everything he says is perfectly valid. He's not picking apart a perfectly good idea. He's asking very logical questions about the morality of it, and uh how does it make you feel, doing that? Arresting people, jailing people. That's the whole thing. It's not just the arresting, it's the jailing people that have broken no laws. But yeah, Colin Farrell is really good. The arc he goes on is really, really good and really underrated. How he does start off in a lot of cop movies. If there's a Fed, he is this, this dick in a suit that you love to hate. But over the course of the movie, he goes on this arc where certainly by the time you get to the end, like especially after the murder takes place, you find out that he was a homicide detective, and for the first time anyone in the movie gets to actually practice homicide detective work. He reveals himself that he's actually a really great cop, and then he figures the whole scheme out pretty quick, and then right when you couldn't possibly like him more, then when he gets blown away, it's perfectly like sad in that film noir way of like the guy had it and then he blew it by
He's
telling the villain.
Well, he's also this interesting contrast because he's played off as this person of faith, you know, because he's
Mm.
always holding this crucifix and he talks about being Catholic and and Cruz challenges that and others do like, how can you still believe in that when we live in this world where we have these other things and all this technology or whatever, and he's still holding on to that because he's very traditional. He's also the only one that like knows how to be a real cop anymore because all these other
Yeah.
people just rely on the tech all the time. And while they're good at that, they're not good at just looking at a crime scene. He's the one that looks around the Leo Crow crime scene and immediately knows like this is bullshit. You know, like
Yeah.
have you guys never seen a setup before? Like, and so I mean, clearly he had worked, you know, wherever the wire was, and then they transferred him into this nonsense. So he went to Beverly Hills and taught him how to be cops. You know,
It's funny that you mentioned The Wire, Jay, because they bring up quite a few times that Tom Cruise, Anderton, when he was not the chief of the precog division, was a detective in Baltimore. So there may
Yeah.
be something there.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's obvious he was really good, and that's a good to pivot point to talk about Anderson as a character because we get to see him at like his very best early on, and then immediately we get to see what he's like when you shut all that down at night, and he's like a drug addict, depressive, who's constantly reliving the worst moment of his life. You know, and it's you really feel for the guy. And I gotta say, like the first time I saw this, I thought, man, Cruz is trying real hard to sell this or whatever. But the more you watch it, there's a real genuineness to that performance. Like you can tell, like he is diving deep into this idea of this character who's lost this kid, and it is everything to him because it's a problem that he absolutely cannot fix, no matter what he resources he has at his disposal, and it drives him nuts.
Yeah, this is I think this is definitely one of Cruise's best movies and one of his best acting jobs from around a time where he was, biggest movie star in the world. So he wasn't getting a whole lot of, acting gigs. And in this big epic sci-fi movie, I think he does some of his best acting. And I was also thinking, watching it again lately, how this is. I mean, I have to watch them all again, but it's like this has got to be one of the darkest protagonists in a Spielberg movie. Like off the top of my head, I don't know if this is the only drug addict. They don't really delve too much into his the negative side of him being a drug addict, but like this is a guy. He's messed up in the head. He is a drug addict. He's not exactly corrupt, but it's not good. Have this most high profile detective in America be someone who he can't hack it when he's off the clock and has to do drugs. But they make it where it's still where yeah it makes sense because he is this guy. He's a great detective, a great he's smart. He's a hard ass. He's a super smart guy, and yet none of that was able to help him to prevent him losing his son. And that probably fuels this cycle in his head that just and having to be in the ultimate position where, you know, he would have been able to prevent a crime like that, what happened to his son. Being in that position every day, it probably just drives him more and more insane. And Cruise plays that in the movie so well. The idea that just under the surface, he is ready to snap. Like just that quick bit when he comes home and that cereal box with the really annoying jingle, like animation is on it, and he tries to tap it to turn it off and it doesn't, and he just takes and just flings it across the room. And Cruise is always really good when it comes to that kind of anger. And I always think of that bit of he sells that white hot rage, and he really sells it, you know, later on when he really and in that apartment scene, it's like when he shows him doing the drugs and how he like this guy is pretty messed up in the head. He's like, it's not just watching home movies, but it's like doing the drugs and wanting to like be in the home movies, replaying them in his head and doing drugs just to like a cop who's all about, you know, predicting the future as a guy who's really, really stuck in the past in a bad way, really needs some therapy. And then which is great for like a film noir detective story. Is like right when this guy is at his like ready to snap, this guy needs help. He is hit with the most, you know, stressful emergency disaster that any, you know, detective could ever face.
Yeah, Cruise has perfected that rage out moment since like go all the way back to like All the Right Moves. And he pulls that on Craig T. Nelson a couple times. You know, he's just I don't know. It's just maybe it's his little actor secret. He just knows how to burn real hot, real quick. You know, and every time he does it, I've seen him do it probably 40 times through the years and stuff. It it always plays the same, and it's very genuine because you can buy it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's easy to like, I'm so mad at you, girl, but it never feels like stagey. It always
Yeah.
feels like something that's coming out of the actual motivations of the character. Like, there's a, you know, the cereal box is just an annoyance, but he's blowing up at it because that's a thing he can smash.
Yeah.
That's a thing he can do to let some of that rage that he carries around day in and day out, and that won't get him like fired.
Yeah, it's like that time it's that great moment in the I referenced the Batman movie and the plot summary when Michael Keaton grabs that fire poker and smacks the wall and says, "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts." Yeah, I mean, because that comes from like a very different place than the rest of that performance. But if you've seen Michael Keaton's comedy work up to that point, that's just who he is. He can just do that thing, and every now and then he'll turn that little thing on, and it's like, ooh, that was fun. You know, where did that come from? And again, that's the thing about this movie, and it's maybe it's what ultimately frustrated me about it for all these years is that this setup is incredible. I'm drawn into all of this stuff, and I think you're onto something, Kurt. This is a very dark protagonist, and I think Spielberg wants us to realize that, and it's paying a little bit of homage to the source material because in the book, the Anderton guy he's a lot older and he's paranoid because he thinks somebody's trying to come get his job, but he also is wondering like, is this really ethical? Is this right? You know, all these years of doing this, but he's sort of so much a piece of the system that he can't let go of it now, right? He's just got to keep doing it. And Cruise is playing that throughout all of this stuff. And you see that too with the rest of his team, you know, like there's some good character actors in this thing. Like Neil McDonough really stands out. You know, how do you not miss that dude? I mean, his eyes just pop off the screen, right? Those big blue eyes anytime he's doing anything. He's really fun. And then some of the other folks that are the pre-crime officers you've seen in the 50 other things through the years and stuff. I think of like Steve Harris, who's somebody you've seen in a lot of things, and it just really sticks out. I think he was on Homicide actually too. Speaking of The Wire, and things like that. But you've seen these actors do these things, and then of course you've got the neat Colin Farrell thing, and then you bring in Max von Sydow, who is this mentor, father of pre-crime. Again, he's much more like the Anderton character of the book, and I think it's neat that they've split him into two here. And as we know, he's ultimately the one like propping up the lie of all of this stuff, and he'll be the one that has to sell out his protege here. And I don't know, like it's almost too on the nose when you cast the Exorcist slash the devil slash all the things that he's done to be that character. It seems like.
Well, I love Max von Sydow. I mean, that guy's I mean, he is a legend of legends, like international legend. Like he wasn't just doing movies in America; he was doing movies all over the world. I mean, he was a legend in Sweden before. He was doing movies in Hollywood. I know he's done movies in French. Like he's a guy who can speak. I don't know how many languages, but he's in the Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Like all through his career, he's always been in really good stuff. And Spielberg just threw him in this one, and I really like this character. There's like because the thing of the mentor who turns out to be the villain. If you do it right, that is a good twist. And with this movie, I really didn't see it coming because Max von Sydow in that first like half hour, he does come off so avuncular, and you like him. One of my favorite lines. One of my favorite lines in any sci-fi movie about might be my favorite as far as set in the future is when side he's talking to Tom Cruise and he says something like, "You got to look out for pre-crime because me, it's like I'm a generation nobody listens to." And right away when I saw the movie, I'm like, the movie set in 2054. It's like, what generation is he? It's like he's me. It's like because and it made me laugh because it's like when I was going to school in 2002, they were always telling us that we are the most important generation. It's like you're the voice of the future. It's like you're going to be the future leaders and so on and so forth. And then right away, and then Spielberg makes this movie where an old man says like, well, no one gives a shit about what I have to say. Anyone my age, like this, and a very again, like I said, a very super pessimistic thing for Spielberg to do, and just a little throwaway joke there, but I like Sito, especially when he does make the turn to being the villain, like in that scene with Danny in the apartment. That bit where the camera's pushing on him and he says, "You know what I hear right now? Nothing." Like that sequence is the lighting on him is so perfectly film noir. And then later on, when he's talking to Cruise's wife, and when she finally, gets it out of him, he slips up and says that, it's like I'll see if somebody ever drowned a woman. But what was her name? Like, well, I never said she drowned. And the look on Sitow's face, and that bit when he just pushes the chair in between them across the room, it's like Sitow's like a big guy. He's like I don't know how to. He's like 6'4". He's a giant of a man, and so he can be really imposing when he wants to. Because this is what was Ming? He's Ming, and in Flash Gordon, when he wants to be a villain, he can be a really good villain. So to have that arc of him being a surprise villain, I thought was really fun to watch in this one.
And it's weird because you would think that, he's an older guy. He's not really a physical threat, but no, he's still Max von Sydow, and he still is very imposing when it's time to be imposing. Like he doesn't look like, Tom Cruise is going to be able to push him around later in the movie. He still looks like, it's the thing of where, I'm not as good as I used to be all the time, but every once in a while I've still got it in me. That sort of, and it's not necessarily an impression of physical strength. It's an impression of ruthlessness. Like he's got the predatory kind of eyes that just say, I will do whatever I have to do to protect this project.
See, the way I'm reading it is the minute he popped on screen, and I mean I'm talking about from the get go. I'm like, this is obviously somebody who's up to no good because it's Max von Sydow. Like that's just part of who he is. He's not the fucking hero. He's the James Bond villain. I mean,
That's right. Yeah.
that's who he is, and I'm waiting for him to turn. And
Huh.
and that's what makes it fun. And you talk about that sequence with the wife later on. I almost wonder if subconsciously he's like, I need to be caught. I want to be caught. I don't want to do the wrong thing. And he slips up and he realizes it. And the other, like the one shoulder's like, good, tell her the rest of it. And the other one's like, shut the fuck up. Before you blow the rest of this for us. But I've never find him not imposing. And I think that's part of it is that's why he was so great as the devil in Needful Things. Spoiler alert, by the way, because he's just like, he's bad, but you just get sucked in, because he can just do it. It's the performance and that way of being so big, but also like being able to hunch over and play small and just just lure you in. You can get how this guy was able to spin this tale. And what I find interesting about the character, though, just beyond even Francito's performance, is that this character has bought this lie for so long that he's even believing his own hype now. He's told this version of this story so many times, and he's told what this can be because in theory, it's a great idea, right? Like, what if we could prevent crime on a global level? Why would we not want to do that? And yes, theoretically, it sounds great, except for, and then you start listing all the problems that he just doesn't want to talk about. And I don't know, I find that interesting for this one because anytime someone challenges his authority, he can be very like grandfatherly in a lot of ways and mentally, except when somebody challenges his authority, whether it's Cruise, whether it's Colin Farrell, it's the wife, anybody. It's when he kind of bows up and says, no, wait a minute, and you kind of get that off the lady that Cruise goes to visit later, who really was the science brains behind all of this stuff and figured out that these poor, mutated children of drug addicts were able to do this. And then it got taken away from her. That's a commentary about science in a lot of ways too, right? Is that she couldn't stand up to him, because he was just so scary as a person. I think there's something neat in the character there. Cause again, the setups of this, all this stuff is working for me. I'm like, I'm digging this. This is neat. It's very cool to get into all this stuff and to see this world of these people, and you see the Gideon, the Tim Blake Nelson character in the prison, which I call it the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" prison, because it pretty much was, right? It's because he's just playing that same folksy character that he's just known for. And you just see this guy and you hear what he's saying and you realize like, what a perpetual hell of a prison that they put these people in, because maybe they would have done it. Maybe they wouldn't have, you don't know, but it's almost like that little bit in Demolition Man, where Stallone in a terrible way is talking about the hell that it was to be frozen like that, and a little bit of what we know, like Han Solo's life was like in Carbonite, right? This is not a sleep. You're actively tormented the entire time by what might have been.
Yeah, that whole thing of the prison and the fact that they arrest you without question, and that apparently the way that guy freaks out when he sees the halo, whatever the thing is they put on your head that makes you instantly go unconscious. It's like the way he freaks out, because they don't say exactly what it feels like. They keep kind of leave it up to your imagination. All you know is that apparently it is really bad, which it gets bad enough that like when Tom Cruise finds out that he is going to be fingered in a future murder, we believe it. We believe that he is not going to try and explain himself. It's like, I am getting the hell out of here right now, because they are not going to listen to me.
Yeah, well, no, they're not going to listen. You're right. Like he knows how fast the system works. So when the ball rolls out and his name is on it, the clock begins to tick and you're like, how is he going to get out of this? And what I feel like I'm watching here is Cruise is prototyping what I've seen him do in so many of these Mission Impossible films, particularly like the latter 4 or 5 of them, where something happens and then Ethan Hunt has to get out of a room where he's surrounded by people, right? and he just does it, because that's just who he is. I'm like, I feel like Cruise is testing that idea, or he got it from this and decided, hey, we're just going to keep doing this in every one of these MI movies because it works. And it is a great chase. There's some Spielberg like cheesiness too. Like they're jumping around on the rocket packs and they fry the burgers perfectly, and all that stuff is going on. I mean, I feel like that's Steven Spielberg trying to have fun in the middle of this dour noir film, and all this stuff going on. But I love the way that Cruise like hits the rocket immediately once he's been fingered for this crime, because he doesn't know who is this, and it's suddenly this realization on his face that I have put how many hundreds of people through this exact set of emotions right that I'm in right now, and I don't know how to deal with it. Also, I'm high, so how do I handle that problem?
They always run, Jay.
Yeah, and just overall, it's just such a great story. Whether it's the future of the you know the predicting the future part or not, just the idea of going after the leader of any kind of detective squad. It's like you're going after the one guy who knows how, the only man on the planet who would know how to evade these techniques. He knows how to, well, eventually how to, get around the eye
Yeah.
scan. He knows how all the tech works. Like, probably there's probably only like 30 people in the world who like have access to those jetpacks, so he knows how to crank it to make it work the other way. The six sticks, which I absolutely love. um
I like the little pulse rifle that he like Terminator 2's around, like the gun swing. Like I thought that was kind of a neat weapon of choice.
that is one of my, that apparently came out of the think tank. That and the
Mhm.
six stick, which apparently, I don't know if it's 100% real, but the six stick is something apparently they're working on, of like electrical
There are versions
charge.
of that exist. They're just not in wide use. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But the sonic boom gun is up. That is up there with one of the greatest movie sci-fi guns ever, like right next to the egg gun in the Fifth Element. And it's the only, like, one of my only complaints is like, that gun is only used for about 18 seconds and you never see it again, which is good. Can't have too much of a good thing, but it is just so one of the coolest visual effects, and the mix of visual effects and sound of the impact of a sonic boom, like, because they were trying to come up with what would be non-lethal weaponry in the future, because they
yeah.
don't just want to shoot people.
Would it surprise either one of you to know that there's only like 450 effect shots in this whole movie?
It would. It's yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember I was looking at the behind the scenes stuff, and Spielberg was talking about it, like George Lucas, like they were making Attack of the Clones at the same time,
Hmm.
and he was talking about how George Lucas, he was trying to create a whole different kind of movie where it's like, I got two actors in a room covered in blue paint, and then I'll make the movie. That'll be the real movie. And with Spielberg, he didn't. He he actively didn't want to. He does everything but say that's a bad way to make a movie when he was talking about
Which
Lucas.
is wild because we're talking about the man that 20 years later would make Ready Player One, which is almost an entirely digital movie in a lot of
Pretty
ways. I mean,
much.
it's a lot of mocap, but I mean, it's a well, as with everything, you evolve or you go extinct, as Spielberg knows. But at this time, I found that neat because I didn't know that, and I heard him talk about that in that behind the scenes clip, and I thought, yeah, though this is a movie that is a lot of sets and a lot of location shots, a lot of sets. It's a lot of sets, but then it's also the way they shot it. Putting all this like almost grainy sepia tone over it, even when it's futuristic and they've got like the Tron cars and shit going up and down the
Mhm.
interstate. I don't know. I just thought it's just a neat aesthetic to look at. It's like, how can I put this noir filter over this futuristic movie? When we've got all this stuff going on. I don't know. I dug the chase though. What did y'all make of the whole like eye transplant situation and then the little robots that had to get on him like that? Man, eye violence always bothers me in a movie anyway. So I still cringe at that even thinking about it now. But when that little thing is peeking under his blinder and
Yeah.
it's too early, I was worried. I was like, oh no, he's gonna go blind in his new eyes.
Well, I love that whole the eye doctor, or the black market organ dealer, eyeball dealer, played by Peter Stormare, is one of my favorite character actors. He's not always good, but when he is good, he is
He's
exceptional. Like,
always the same. He's always
oh
this
yeah,
guy. you know?
he knows how to play a creep in it. Like, I don't think Constantine is a great movie, but God, he was good as the
He's the
devil.
creep from Fargo all the
Yeah,
time. That's what he
he
is.
was. And in Minority Report, it's one of the things I love about this movie is it's such a perfect film noir. In the like, so many good film noirs have a huge array of weird characters. Like, array meaning guys from all levels of society. Like, you got the guy who's like, like maybe a politician in Washington D.C., an FBI agent, and you got some guy in a dingy apartment in the middle of downtown DC with, like, his literally intro is, blowing his nose with his hands, um uh sick with a cold, talking about, oh, don't worry about it, I could sew a dead cat inside of you and I wouldn't give you an infection with the amount of antibiotics I'm pumping into you. Which Cruz says, yeah, that's comforting. But I love that character and this sort of unnecessary but funny reveal of how they know each other, of that he was a guy who was a plastic surgeon who would set his patients on fire, making and would videotape it, like, so disturbing. And I like how Cruz is he's kind of high on the medication as he's chuckling as he's saying it. And it's one of my favorite lines in any movie is where it said, "You set your patients on fire," and Stormare says, "I put them out, some not as quickly as others." And but I love that sequence. I love the idea that Cruz. That's the thing about Cruz is he's a good detective in this high tech world, high profile world, but he knows he's a detective who knows, like, he knows where to find a drug addict who will give him drugs in an alley at 2 o'clock in the morning. Like he is a dark character, so he knows before all this he knew if I ever need if I ever need to swap out my eyeballs, I know a guy. Um, which is, again, he's not entirely corrupt, but he's not entirely noble either. But I love that sequence with Stormare because it's so, it's so, like, it's nasty, it's funny, it's freaky, and that machine, it's like you don't see him actually extract the extract the eyes. That would have been too. You probably couldn't do that in a PG-13, but like they don't show it, but they make you picture it.
Yeah, they make you do all the hard work of picturing
Yeah.
this filthy Eastern European prying out someone's eyeballs in a room that is so filthy they could have shot a Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel in
Yeah.
there and nobody would have known the difference.
Yeah, it felt there was a Rob Zombie aesthetic to some of this, or I feel like just another thing zombies probably
Yeah, if you
stolen.
would just like replace Peter Stormare with like Richard Brake,
Yeah,
you would 100%, that would 100% be like a Rob Zombie bit.
yeah.
But it's interesting to see that we have not one but two characters in this movie who are snuffling and snorting around from a cold. And I haven't quite put together what that means, but I feel like there's got to be a deeper meaning to it than just, then he says, "You think we'd have cured the common cold by now." But there's got to be something there. I feel like maybe it is the kind of a counterpoint to the fact that the movie itself looks so looks dingy. It looks both dingy and too clean at the same time.
Well,
Does that make sense?
look at the parts that are too clean. It's the government's special pet project thing. It's what's getting all the money is the tech, right? And when you go on the highway with the self-driving cars that are all, teched out and stuff, and they go to the mall that's all like real swanky and things, that's a different part of town than we're all, Anderton's running around here to get his eyes popped out and where the prison is and stuff like that. But we're like the guy in the opening sequence that's going to kill his wife where he lives. It's like Georgetown. It's real nice, and all this stuff like that, or I guess future Georgetown, but minus Pazuzu. But it's all real nice. But then like right behind it is this sort of rundown playground, and it's this idea that because in this future we're post nuclear war, so there's a lot less people on Earth to begin with. They don't really say that in the movie, but it's implied in the book that it's easier to police the world when there's a lot less people because we irradiated, a lot of them. And I mean, that's what Philip K. Dick was writing this in 1954. So 100 years into his future, he thought, well, 3/4 of us will be gone anyway, so that's what he was writing about. And they kind of imply that here, but the idea that like there's a lot of facade up, but if you peel away a little bit, it's really rotten underneath, and why there's no cure to the common cold. I'll tell you how I read that is that there's no money in that. Why would we do that? Then people will stop going to the doctor too. Well, screw that. We've already, solved crime. Let's not fix everything at once. And that's how I just look at it as one of those ways of, they're going to pump all the money into the fancy things, in the good part of town, but the rest of it they'll just let go to hell because they don't care about it anyway.
And if we had done that, we wouldn't have gotten the shot of Peter Stormare with snot coming out of his nose.
Exactly right. That is a gross shot, by the way.
Oh yeah, and yeah, you're talking about that back and forth of the super that like the pre-crime lab where it's like super white clean like the like the first spaceship in Star Wars, and then again Peter Stormare's apartment and the way they do that, it's two things. It's like one, it's to me that makes me think of really great film noirs and crime stories of showing both sides. It's like the nice pristine police stations and then a dingy alley and making them both and making you buy both. Like The Wire does that so well. It's like the going back and forth between here we are in the mayor's office, here we are with some guy shooting it up in an alley, and then later on we're going to be in somebody's cop car, and just being able to go back and forth like that. Like as a film noir, that's what I like about Minority Report. But as a sci-fi movie, I don't know if that's a think tank thing or if it just worked out that way, but I always find that is so realistic of like they have all this like unbelievable technology and yet the world is still a piece of shit. And it's like,
Yeah.
on one level, is that just like a sci-fi dystopian thing? But then it's like, not really, because I just think about the technology we have. It's like we're getting pretty close, like to having everything in Minority Report, except for like the jetpacks. Well, no, we're getting there. I've seen jetpacks, but but the fact is, it's like all the horrible parts of the world of like society are still horrible. It's like you
Yeah.
can like you can in 10 minutes you go to any place in America or anywhere, you'll be able to see the most advanced technology you find, and in 10 minutes you'll be able to walk and see you know horrifying crime and conditions and
Yeah.
bad schools and drug addicts, and how it's like, and yeah, the cure for the common cold is like no matter how many things they invent, all these technology things, they still can't fix. It's like real problems.
And I mean, part of that too is just the nature of being a person. Like the common cold is a virus that is spread because you don't wash your hands the way you're supposed to, or you you sneeze on your shirt and then you don't wipe it out. Like this, it's just life, and I think that's what it's part of what Philip K. Dick was trying to get at, even though his story is really more about like politicians and corruption and paranoia and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't get into this. This movie gets deeper into this other stuff about like even if you could solve all of the problems, you could solve the problem of murder in the world. Like you took that away, it's not like you're going to take away everything. There's still going to be child abductors. There's still going to be loss. There's still going to be people that make bad decisions. You're still going to, or they're going to think about making bad decisions. And so the premise of this movie is that we're going to punish people for thinking about making a bad decision.
Hmm.
Even if they're like at the moment, and Cruise plays this out himself, is that Atkins is telling him like you can still choose, and that's why I find that interesting the way that he breaks in and all this stuff and gets her out of there. And I love the chase sequence where like she's like directing him through traffic and stuff like wait 3 seconds and then here comes like Casey Affleck's balloons from Ocean's 11 to get in the way, just so he can get through the mall security. I liked all of that. It's when they wind up in the apartment with Leo Crow where I just hit a wall with this movie, and I wanted to see what y'all thought about this, because it's when it's the same I feel about the original The Fugitive series. When they finally let you know that there was an actual one-armed man, they screwed that series up. The people that made it said that forever, and having watched it in syndication growing up, I felt that, because when you knew that was real, well now like you can't root for the cops anymore because they're wrong. Like when that was a setup, when that guy tells you it was at that moment, he was doing it for a payoff for his family or whatever. You're like, oh, so now I've just got to watch John Anderson get totally screwed by the system. That sucks.
Well, I guess. Well, this is definitely one part where we differ, because I think that this is just about the best scene of the movie, and again, it's about the whole package of once we're told Tom Cruise is going to potentially kill this guy, it literally starts off a countdown, and like like any great mystery movie or thriller, it's like it's all about building up to a climax, and this movie literally shows you what the climax is going to be, exactly what it's going to look like, and it's all about meeting that time. I love that phrase of time horizon. They don't just say the countdown, they just say time horizon of where that land and the sky meet, and when we get to that climax, and when you see things that were in the vision, like the billboard and the lady with the pipe and all these things, and I can remember watching it the first. This is definitely one where it's like, man, I'd love to like erase my memory and see all that for the first time. But I can remember being very tense about, here we go, this is it. The whole literally everything's been building up to this, so this is going to be. I don't like what to expect, but then you hit you with something that you're really not expecting, and that's that whole picture of a whole bunch of pictures. And then when he finds that picture of his son, this is where Tom Cruise goes into, I would say, definitely like top 2 or 3 bits of best acting in a science fiction film. Like talking about that white hot rage he sells that so well. The music too, when he sees those pictures and says, for the last 6 years, I've thought of only 2 things. My son would look like if he were alive today. And the second is what I would do to the man who took him. And he delivers that. He delivers the sadness of missing his son and the rage of, and if I ever found the guy. And that plays so well with the whole twist is like, of, Max von Sydow. He knows this. He knows that if Tom Cruise ever found that guy, he would kill him on the spot. Hence, perfect for pinning a murder on something. But that whole scene when Leo Crow does walk in, and it's so, I love how darkly casual Cruise is when he just says, "You Leo Crow?" The guy says, "Yeah, who are you?" And he just flies at him and starts beating the shit out of him, and delivers one of my I would say my favorite PG-13 F-bomb is when then he has a glimpse of that his son might still be alive. And he says, "Tell me, you fuck, where is he?" And the guy makes it so sick, talking about how he put him in a barrel and everything, and threw him into the water and something. It's just like, he didn't just kill him, he like tormented him. And again, Tom Cruise starts sobbing and then kicks the guy in the face. And I love the image of like the broken mirror, and like Spielberg points the camera at the shards of glass on the ground and shows him kicking the shit out of him, like kneeing him in the stomach in there. And again, that music, the score in that scene of the violins picking up as the billboard comes up, and you can feel it's like, here we go. And right then he doesn't pull the trigger. And I love that in the movie. This is the only time in the movie they never really get into. It's like they're all about, we've got to make sure we get there before the countdown goes off. And this is the only time in the movie where you find out what happens when the countdown goes off. The answer is, we'll see. We don't know what happens. And he chooses not to kill him. And he reads him his Miranda rights, something he probably hasn't had to do in a long time after the pre-crime laws strip criminals of their Miranda rights. And I love the twist of all this thing about killing this guy, and he finally chooses not to kill him. And the guy is like, "Oh, this really ruins my day. I was really hoping you were going to kill me, man. So please kill me." And I love that he does kill him. He by accident, and that creates the whole thing with the prevision, conundrum is like, did the precogs predict that, or was that a genuine accident? And it's like, you find out, did he have a Minority Report ever on him, or it's like this happened exactly the way it was always going to, or not, or whatever it is. I love the dark twist of, we spent all this time, you think he's going to solve this own homicide, and he's not going to do it. And the dark twist is he does solve it, but he kills the guy anyway.
Well, if you believe Agatha, there was no Minority Report on this one. Yeah. And it was supposed to happen this way all along. And the timeline got delayed a little bit because of that pesky thing of free will,
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing where I feel like they had an opportunity in the source story to play with this, because it's not that there is a Minority Report, it's that there is always 3 Minority Reports that they don't agree like 95% of the time. But that they just shovel it under the thing. Like, that is a way more interesting twist when you find that out in the last couple of pages of the story, is that there's always Minority Reports, because it could always go a different way, because you can always choose. And this is Philip K. Dick talking about how technology can never outrace people, is that even in the most technologically advanced freak accident of the world, you still have a choice. Yeah, and I think that's what I bump up against. I'm with you, Kurt, up until a point. All of this is so incredible. It's well done. It's well acted. It's paced. It's got all the tension going. And then the balloon pops, because it still just goes down, because it feels like and we should say, like, the reason all of this gets put into motion is one of these echo things, like memory of a past murder comes up or whatever. for the precogs, and there's one that keeps coming back up, and we'll learn later that that's Agatha seeing her own mother's murder, and it's Burgess's doing that made that happen, or whatever, and that somehow like they fixate on that. Tom Cruise fixates on it in a little bit because he gets obsessed with that. Because he's like, there's something about that that isn't right. And Burgess is so worried, like, oh God, if he finds out I did that, it's going to undermine all this. I can't let that happen. So that's when he puts all this other stuff into motion. So he's had this on the go, like ready to do this in case it ever came up. And then he just does it. That's what's so wild about this is that you realize that in no time was our protagonist ever really in the safe position he thought he was in, you know? And it's I don't know. I find that all just kind of it lets the air out of the balloon a little bit for me because it's so much more fun to think about the idea of to explore these ideas about is this the right thing to do? I think like what Colin Farrell's character is bringing up is way more interesting of a conundrum than this other stuff about the sun and all that because none of that's in the source stuff. They invented it for this movie and it's fine to have that, but I feel like that derails some of what of more interesting things or things I was more interested in were going on at the time, that we just get lost in this thing and then it becomes the rest of this movie is about this crime that will never be solved, but the idea is that it was going to happen anyway. So I don't know, this movie feels like it's trying to have it at the same time, like you have free will, except that you really don't, like what Rama's bringing up.
Well, I like that there's an element of ego with Anderton of he thinks that because it's him, he must be set up and there must be a minority report on me because I would never kill anybody. I love that bit where he says that to Hinneman and it's like, I'm not going to, what does he say? It's like, just says, I'm not going to kill anybody. And she says, hold that thought. And which makes me think it's like he's going through the thought process of every single, like whatever it is, the exact number, like 1108 people. He's like, every single one of them is like, I was never going to do it. I'm not going to kill anybody. It's like, that's what he thinks. And again, the tragic twist is he makes the right decision to not do it, but it ends up happening.
That's kind of a pretty standard film noir thing to happen, right? Like, you see people struggle and then the gun goes off and somebody dies. Yeah. And then, he's on the run for, the detective's on the run for murder or whatever. And,
well, it's the idea of, Kurt, think back to when we did Kubrick's The Killing, which is a noir film, it was wild to think about Stanley Kubrick doing that stuff, is you're asked to root for this criminal, who is doing the wrong thing. Or whatever. And then when he finally gets caught in the end, it's like, what difference does it make? Like this is what the guy says. And you just feel like, oh God, it's such a letdown, but that's a noir thing. I'm fine with a downer ending, by the way. I have no problem with that. The fact this movie doesn't have one, it's going to be a real sticking point for me that we're going to get to in a minute. Because I feel like that's where the Spielberg magic schmaltz gets all over this movie in the third act. But up to this point, I think we're at very interesting places because he gets arrested at this point. Like they finally catch him. He's going to prison. And you got Tim Blake Nelson going like, enjoy the sweet yonder or whatever the hell it is he's saying, all that weird stuff. And it's like, yeah, this is getting real dark and real strange. And I'll ask both of you now, do you think anything that happens in the third act actually happens? Or is this John Anderson's like dream best scenario while he's in prison?
Well, I go along with that. This actually did happen, but much like in Total Recall, another Philip K. Dick story, there's that sort of in Total Recall, it's a lot more that is a lot more ambiguous about is any of this happening. But I love the way Tim Blake Nelson delivers that, saying they say it's kind of a rush, that all your dreams come true and all these things, like, and the idea of that is in my opinion, that is a great sci-fi explanation for what is a ludicrously happy ending. I like the happy ending in this, but I think that works it doesn't completely work, but I like that as a defense of if you don't buy it, because it is it is all in his head, because it is way too good to be true.
Man, what a great use of Tim Blake Nelson, by the way. He's literally in 2 scenes and he's the most interesting character, sitting there in his wheelchair playing the pipe organ, which is just an insane choice.
Yeah. I mean, that feels like completely something he just came up with too. I don't think any of that, like from all I could tell, none of that was on the page or any of that. They just brought him in and told him, do your thing, man." And he just started doing Tim Blake Nelson shit. And and I like it though. I like the idea that it is that what we're seeing is this wish fulfillment, dream stuff. And I'll tell you like evidence of that, to this. Burgess has planned this out so well that there can be no flaws in it unless we are to believe that part of him has this other angel on his shoulder that wants to confess to it, because the estranged wife is like not a character in this movie until all of a sudden she is. And that's the one thing is like, well, why would she all of a sudden get involved? And also, why is she the prototype for the Rebecca Ferguson character in the Mission Impossible movies, who's just as much of an ass kicker as her husband is, and all this stuff. And not that I'm against that idea, but it's just we don't have anything that's told us who this woman was, other than the mother of the child that's gone. And the way it all like, it's fun the way it works out. It is Spielberg schmaltzy. Like, I'm going to steal the eyes and I'm going to use it to get in. I'm going to point a gun at the guy. And I'm going to get my husband out and we're going to go on all this stuff. We're going to figure all this shit out. And the way that they set it all up, it just seems, I don't know, it just seems so easy in some way. And there's just something about it that doesn't sit well with me. And maybe it says too much about me, but I'm like, no, I think it would have been cooler if the bad guy got away with this shit. Because when he kills Colin Farrell, like that's when he ultimately reveals himself. Like, well, this is obviously a bad guy, So that's a real shock. Max von Sydow is the bad guy, but now you have even more reason to go like, well, what if he got away with it? What would it look like? Like that's a complex and oddly difficult thing to wrestle with. And I don't think Spielberg wanted to do that at all, but it would have been neat if he tried.
It would have been. This would have been the sci-fi Chinatown, because that's exactly what it would have been.
Oh, excellent call on that. Yeah.
The villain who, similar build to John Huston, Max von Sydow, another big old guy. But I like the I like the idea of the thing that screws Lamar up is he did, as far as the idea of to be able to frame someone. If you were able to frame someone the way he did, it is like it is the perfect crime. And he planned everything out to a T, except for one little problem. He forgot that he's an old man, and that that he could make a simple, casual, conversational mistake. Like he forgot. Like if it was a younger guy playing that character, but him slipping up like that, it would be tougher to buy. But because I don't know how old he was.
Why doesn't he? That's the moment. If he realizes that and what he's already done at this point, why does he not kill her on the spot?
Because the precogs are back in their tank.
Oh, that's right. They've put him back in the milk bath. You're right.
And he would have got caught.
Yeah.
That's why he says, "I'll go. Maybe I'll show up and visit you at the cabin later."
Yeah,
because that's outside of the hearing area for the precogs.
Yeah.
Remember, they've got like a 200-mile radius or something.
Yeah, they are limited. Yeah, you're right. It's because of the wattage that they're pumping through them or something like that.
Yeah, so if they replaced that milk bath with blue milk from Star Wars, they would have been able to like see the entire East Coast.
They'd just been throwing stuff over their shoulders, caution to the wind.
Yeah, Samantha Morton would have like been levitating. It'd have been great.
And it would just randomly disappear because she's tired. So, but anyway, no, you're right. But okay, so that does answer my questions. Why does he not just kill her on the spot? Because he can't at that point. But I don't know. I feel like that guy would have found a way to make her disappear or something. I don't know.
He would have for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, event. That was the whole point of "I'll see you at the cabin." Like he's gonna go out there and she's gonna take a what was her name? Laura something.
Yeah, Laura.
What was the name of the dead lady?
Anne Lively. Anne Lively.
Yeah, she was gonna go take an Anne Lively bath.
Yeah,
at that cabin.
Yeah. That's what we find out is who Anne Lively was. Is Agatha the mother, who wanted her back basically. It was like, I'll just stop. Like I've cleaned myself up. Stop like exploiting my daughter for all this stuff. And then he kills her for it. And I mean, I think that goes to the whole point here. And I'll get off my soapbox about, I wish it's all just Tom Cruise's dream, because it's obviously not. I go with it too. I'm like, no, all that shit happens. This is how this works out, because that's what this movie is and stuff. But I think it's neat that, um, even at its core, this great idea is incredibly corrupt. Like the woman with the like killer Hunger Games plants even says, like, this is so wrong. Like, this is not what we created this for, but I couldn't do anything about it because I'm a weirdo lady here in my greenhouse. So, I there's there's a lot of stuff that happens. I feel like the first third of this movie is on fast forward. The middle of it slows down to get a lot of things accomplished, and then the last bit of it just hits the gas again. We're just, no, we're not pitting. We're going with the tires we got. We're just going to roll with it, and it flies. And that's a hard thing to do as a filmmaker, like to make a noir that moves by quickly. And we're talking about a 2 hour and 20 minute movie, but it still blows by. Like, yeah, I don't feel the length of this movie at all, even though I don't love how it wraps itself up.
Yeah, it is. I always forget that when I watch it. That yeah, it's a longer movie. It's 2.5 hours at a time where movies, sci-fi movies weren't 2.5 hours. That's a normal thing now. It's like now you make a Batman movie, it's got to be 3 hours long. But yeah, it does. It flies along. Spielberg is good. He's been pretty good with that across the board, whether it's a shorter movie or a longer movie. Like Saving Private Ryan's a solid 3 hours, and that always goes by pretty quick. But I think with this movie, he fills it with a lot of stuff that if that there's so many things to think about, and the movie's going by so quickly that you can't. By the time you're thinking about what's going on, the next scene has already started, and you're playing catch up, and not until it's over that you can really hit pause and really start to analyze stuff.
I feel like there must be some sort of financial impetus to keep the program going.
Hmm.
It can't just be
Yeah.
about Max von Sydow being like, I want to stop all the crime. There's got to be like, he's got to be like poised to make some kind of big cash lump sum off of it, because they established pretty quickly that Crazy Plant Lady and him are like the parents of the program, the two people who came up with it.
Yeah.
So like he's got to own some patents on. He's
Well,
got
I
to
mean,
like
look at that pad he lives in and all the
yeah.
stuff
So
he's
clearly,
got,
like that's a
Yeah.
lucrative contract that he's got, and he's going to defend it. And I feel like maybe the whole purpose behind the frame up to get the feds off his back and that
Mhm.
sort of thing was just simple greed. Like,
Well, and that does go back to the source story, that the idea that this guy's paranoid that the army's trying to frame him because they don't want to lose their job. No, they actually are, because they don't want to lose their job. Like that's the whole thing. He's like, yeah, but yeah, the system is flawed, but yes, they are trying to frame you because they don't want to be without a job, and they would rather put somebody in who could be their puppet. And that's what happens at the end of the book, more or
Philip K.
less.
Dick character gets framed by the government. Perish the thought, Joe.
Say it ain't so. Yeah, but I mean, really, that's the idea, and I don't know, I like it. But what do y'all think about, I mean, the expose is what it is. What do you think about Burgess's decision there? He's got the little pistol out and he decides to turn it on himself. So the ultimate question is like, can you have free will over determinism? Well, the answer is yes, obviously. But what do y'all think about his decision to shoot himself there?
Well, I look at that as like if there's if there's a titular Minority Report, it's about that moment, because the precogs see it as he was going to kill Anderton, and instead he turns around and kills himself. And I mean, I like it. It's he doesn't want to live with the. It's such a dark ending for a Spielberg movie of a guy killing himself. He doesn't want to go to prison, and he can't live with the shame of it. And so
Oh,
he's always like his only option is suicide, which is
Yeah,
extremely bleak.
like they vary by playing the tape of the actual murder. They 100% blow up the entire precog program with that one move.
yeah.
I think
mean,
about that. I like, even if for the sake of argument, if the program can, like, if they didn't end the program right there, that would be a thing of like, maybe we maybe this is a bad idea when the people building the system were in fact murderers and drug addicts and crazy people experimenting on children. Like, once all that got out, maybe the program worked out anyway. But I like the idea that the dark version of that they would have done it anyway. Like they just would have put someone else in the chair and just keep the pre-crime
Well,
system going.
I
They
think
would-
you guys are missing that the Spielberg schmaltz has gotten on the bad guy here too at this point, and this is his moment of redemption. It's that
Yeah.
oh, okay, fine then. I'll burn it all down, but I'm gonna do it my way, and I'm not gonna hurt this boy that I've already put through hell. And I've used the worst moment of his life to keep my riches moving forward. I must have a hella insurance policy because the wife will be taken care of. Boom. Like I feel like it is one of those like, no, I'm gonna give everybody the way out moments, which can be annoying if it's not earned. I kind of feel like it's sort of earned, even though I don't find it satisfying as a viewer, but I get it. I get why he would make that choice in that moment.
Hmm.
Like it feels reasonably earned to me. Like how much longer is he realistically going to live?
Yeah.
Were he to go to jail in Demolition Man jail, he would be miserable for whatever the remainder of his existence was. If for some reason he doesn't shoot himself, his whole program that he spent all these years developing is done for. His reputation's in ruins. Like he got outed in front of like everybody in Washington D.C., like all the movers and shakers and power brokers, and like so his professional career and his personal life are probably all done for. And I also feel like maybe, and this is just me adding something to the movie that's not there because why not? Maybe he shot himself with the gun in a last ditch effort to be like, look, see, he shot me. He's a murderer after all. Throw him in one tooth man jail,
I don't know. The way he looks at him though at the end, and he says
Like,
like,
I
"I'm
know-
sorry, my boy."
Like I know that's not really what
Yeah,
has happened, but I like that idea as like just
It
an
could.
extra like dark layer of evil darkness.
Oh, look, I'm here for it, man. I want the Ron fan edited this. I've been sitting here begging for it for 25 minutes. I wanted the darker ending because I feel like I hate to be, Dante and Clerks, but that's life, man. Like it's a down ending. It's how it goes. I feel like that's how this would go. I don't expect government officials to ever be altruistic in the moment of truth. Let me just say that.
Here's some more trauma on the way out. Goodbye.
Yeah, that's Philip K. Dick and I don't agree on a lot of things, but our distrust of the government to make the right decision, yeah, we're pretty well simpatico.
That's a thing. That's a thing about just this character as a villain, as a noir villain, and as a realistic version of today. Of like, I mean, an old corrupt white guy in Washington D.C. Being evil. It's not that tough to swallow. But I love the idea of this is
Damn,
the
and you're
thing that goes-
Canadian, you know that. So
yeah, exactly. But the thing that makes this character scary to me a little bit is a lot like in Chinatown. Is that in Chinatown when John Huston Nicholson just asked him, it's like, why are you doing all this? Like to get money and power. It's like, it's like why are you doing this? And he's like, the future. Like, yeah, it's like, what can you buy? What can you buy that you can't afford? And he says, the future. And there's something scary to me about a really old man planning for the future. Like
yeah,
he's still going to be there for it. And that's the thing about Max von Sydow. It's like, this is an old man towards the end of his life. And he was willing, and he was willing to murder a woman in the most brutal way, drowning her in that lake. It's like, and he doesn't, because that's the thing, he never really explains why he did it. He doesn't explain, maybe it is greed or whatever. I like that it's just sort of a naive slash fascist belief in making the world a better place. And it's like,
Mhm.
exactly why he did it, we don't know, but I like that, like, but Spielberg just shows us whatever the reason is, he is willing to kill someone in the most gruesome way possible. And again, him being an older man, like that might die of old age anyway, and he's still willing to do that is very, unsettling.
Well, I mean, think of it this way: this program is going to be his legacy.
Yeah.
Like some people would do anything to preserve their legacy in the court of public opinion, or just this thing that he's worked so hard in his twilight years. I mean, how many people have they established are still alive thanks to this program? There's there's what 1,108 people in jail
Yeah.
for pre-crimes. So that's at least 1,108 people that whose lives were saved by this.
Mhm.
But by the end of it, they let them all back out of jail, now, and they're watching some of them closely. But like pre-crime is shut down, so I guess they all go to work at Starbucks or the Gap, or whatever, because there's not. I mean, they shut it all down. Beautiful building, just
I mean,
sitting
they
out
just
there.
go back to being like real police.
I mean, I guess, yeah, but it's all of it's undone at the end of the hearing. Tom Cruise giving the monologue about it, that they undo all of it, but they're still keeping an eye on a few. Because I'm like, now that sounds like that sounds very Philip K. Dick, and it also sounds very real. Like, well, I know you didn't commit this crime, but I'm still going to watch you. Like, I had a friend that got accused of a crime once, and he had absolutely nothing to do with it, and the police still harassed him for years afterward because they just knew. And so he ended up moving states away and never came back because he just couldn't get away from it. So I mean, that felt like that was a little dark and also felt very real at the moment. But it's all gone at the end. I mean, this is his legacy is that this was all a lie and it didn't work. And we're gonna send these three weirdos off to the cabin in the woods to read poetry and I don't know, grow their hair out. Maybe they'll start a band. You never know.
So we've went through this whole time and we haven't even brought up Samantha Morton.
No, we haven't. Yeah.
Does she just take roles that allow her to shave her head?
I think so, man. Yeah.
Well, I mean, after this movie comes out, I think she's in Code 47, where she's got like a buzz cut. It's another dystopian sci-fi movie. I don't know if anybody else here has seen it. Kurt is laughing because he probably has. But it's her and Tim Robbins, if you want to talk about giant people in movies.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
a giant man.
And it's related to like biotechnology sort of thing. And it's like people who live in the high density super cities versus the people who live on the outside and like what are essentially concentration camp. And there's like bio passports and stuff like that. It's a really interesting. It's not a great movie, but it's a really interesting movie that looks good.
Yeah.
Because I mean it's Michael Winter. It's a Michael Winterbottom movie, so that should tell you what the general vibe is of it. Very British. But she's got short hair in that. I mean, she was alpha in the last 2 seasons of The Walking Dead. So, and she's got like the buzziest of buzz cuts in that.
I don't think she'll be shaving it off for the Odyssey with Christopher Nolan, but I'm curious to what he's going to put her in because this is exactly the kind of thing he does: is find somebody that's been in stuff for years, but you forgot about them, but they were in this one huge thing once, and I'm going to throw them back on the screen in front of you. So. I'll be really interested to see what that is. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that, but she does have a propensity for these Ripley Alien 3 moments, like you're talking about. So
yeah, and I thought she was really good in this movie. And
she is.
The few scenes that she gets to do something other than swim around.
Yeah, well, I mean, the best thing is in that chase, when she's helping him get away from stuff and the way she's playing, like she can kind of walk sometimes, but can't all the time, because she's sort of debilitated from all the drugs that they've given her, and she's just atrophied from not moving around any. Because them having their own gym, that's like your gym membership that you get, on New Year's and you never freaking go. It's the same thing. It's not doing them any good.
Well, none of them actually had a gym. It was just
I know. I'm just saying, like that's the idea though. But she's like that's a performance that she's giving in this, and it's sort of it's wild to see that because you've got Cruise being so big and all this other stuff going on that you forget about her, but she is really, really good in this. And at the end that she's just sitting there kind of cozying up with a cup of tea, while the twins upstairs are reading every book they can. Okay, cool. Yeah. I buy it.
Oh yeah, I think she is particularly great in this movie because like up to that point when she finally is captured by Cruise, up to this point the movie's playing at a very kind of crime movie sci-fi level, the way everyone talks, very naturalistic and everything. And then when she finally comes out and everything that she says is in a very, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a very unique character. The way she talks is like it's like she's not human, or it's not quite robotic, but it's like not quite. It's like spiritual, and it's very. I haven't seen another performance like it. Like I'm really surprised she wasn't up for an Oscar for that, because it was just so, it was unlike anything else. The way she shivers like that, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you make yourself shiver that much when she's in the car, and like every the way she freaks out in the Leo Crow scene, like the way, it's like I was watching that, like when she actually, when the gun goes off and Leo Crow gets killed, and like the way she just explodes in this, 15 out of 10 level of emotional pain. I was sitting there going, it's like, like just try getting up for your chair when you're watching the movie. Just get up and go get that heated about anything on the spot the way she did. Like that is some unbelievable acting. And then that scene, one of my favorite scenes Spielberg ever did, is that scene where she's hit with that glow of like halo light, and she talks about the potential future Cruise's son might have had. Is just the way she delivers that is so, I think it's beautiful. I think that's one of the best scenes in any movie. And the way it's like such a hopeful, it's so sad because it's talking about something, trying to bring hope to something that is never going to happen. It's like he's dead, he's definitely gone. And the way she caps that by saying, but he's only 6 years old and the other man is so fast. Like, oh, every time I watch that, that is like one of the most gut punch moments ever. Like this beautiful potential story, and then but the other man is so fast, it just makes me sick. It's so well done, and the way she plays it. And then right after that, when she's screaming "run" in Cruise's face at the top of her lungs, again, it's a performance where I'm like, you know, most acting is like that, but that performance is definitely one where it's like, well, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, she's incredible, especially in those moments. Like the, and it's interesting because that also serves as a glimpse as to what these precogs are capable of seeing when they are not doped up.
Yeah.
I don't feel like this is clearly not some story she's making up to make him feel better, because I don't think
Yeah.
she has the emotional capacity to do something like that. I feel like she is able to see, like, well, this is the thread where, he dies at 6 years old. This is the thread where he doesn't get, kidnapped and killed at 6 years old. This is what his future would have been had it not been cut off. But it was cut off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the idea of like when she's finally brought out of the tank and she's shivering, it's like she's still kind of hopped up on the drugs. That's why. And that scene at the end where he's telling about the potential future is like the only time in the movie where she's sober, aside from the very last shot. But that is the thing about the brutality of this entire process of like in the original story, the idea that they're very comfortable in this precog job. But I love the idea that they're kind of enslaved, like they're forced into being machines, very Matrix like, turn into a living battery, and Cruz having to be like, it's just better if you just don't think of them as human. It's like so disturbing, the idea of like these are just three kids, like children of drug addicts, and like they're being treated like machines. And I never thought about that, the idea of the potential of what they could do, of like, you know, the government finds out about them. Let's strap them to a machine and fight crime with them. But the idea of who knows what they're going to do later, if they're probably going to be disconnected from society. But these are people that need to be, authors and, politicians or psychiatrists or something. And they're literally, someone grabbed them and, stuck a USB cord into their brain,
Yeah,
and
like
used them for that instead.
what potential gifts do they have that aren't being
Yeah.
used because there's no money in it?
Yeah.
Versus here's your one skill, dance monkey.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, that is something that and maybe they tried it in the television show that kind of short lived for a little while. I didn't watch any of it. What I read about it, it
Neither
didn't
did
seem
I.
like they ever got anywhere with it. But that would have been an interesting thing to explore. Was what futures did they see for themselves that didn't get to happen because they were stuck in the milk bath,
Mhm.
and stuff. You could go a lot of places with it, but no, she gives an incredible performance in the whole thing. Well, that brings us to the part of the podcast where it's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So, fellas, what are yours for Minority Report? Ron?
It's interesting, Jay, that there's a moment in the movie where it kind of turns you away from it, and that's the moment for me that I find myself really kind of leaning into it. Maybe it's the maybe it's the schmaltz in me that likes the schmaltz in Spielberg. And yeah, it's really a the ending's really too pat with them, like with him and Lara reunited and her being pregnant and all that stuff. It feels maybe that's a step too far. Um, but I don't know. Like fighting a future dystopia together kind of brings people closer, you know? Um, I feel like that's a thread in every let's fight the dystopia movie that's ever been made. So maybe there's some truth to that. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a medium popcorn with some extra butter. It's a very good movie, I think. I feel like had they committed fully to like the darkness of the thing, um, maybe I'd have liked it a little bit more. Or if the schmaltzy ending had felt a little bit more deserved, I would probably like it more. But yeah, it's full of great performances. It's really good Tom Cruise stuff. Samantha Morton is unsurprisingly amazing. Max von Sydow plays it perfectly. Like there, I have no complaints about the movie. It looks awesome. I mean, when you've got Janusz Kaminski doing your cinematography, you know your movie's going to look great if nothing else. And the way they process the film makes it look super cool and kind of amplifies the kind of the silver of everything and the chrome of everything and kind of gives it a really distinctive looking color palette. But good, not great. So medium popcorn.
Kurt.
Well, one of the worst things about Minority Report to me is that it was a hit, made a big chunk of money, it was a top 10 hit of 2002, and it was well received, but it still feels like the movie came and went and that people don't remember it that well. To me, it makes me think of James Cameron's The Abyss in that way. Like it's found an audience, but it's pretty culty for a Spielberg movie. It's not one of the movies I immediately identified the way E.T., Jaws, Indiana Jones, or Schindler's List are. But anyway, I think it's just truly one of the best films ever made. I think it's one of Spielberg's very best films, and that is saying something. He is one of the best. There's a strong argument that he is the best filmmaker. And it's not just Spielberg making a sci-fi movie about looking into the future, figuratively and literally. Although as a sci-fi movie, I think it is dynamite. But again, the thing I love about it is that it's Spielberg making something that he never did before and hasn't done since so far, and that's doing a detective movie, doing a film noir. And as a noir, I just think it is so stellar. Like as a great crime drama, seeing the highs and lows of society, excuse me, seeing the highs and lows of society all in the same runtime. Super high tech police unit, and then we're buying drugs from some scabby blind guy in an alley. Washington D.C. fuddy duddies in the hotel ballroom at the end, and in some dank apartment with a black market eyeball salesman. Like the high tech effects heavy chase scenes, and then there's that villain reveal with Lamar and and shooting Danny and that shot of the smoking gun, which just feels like it could be in any film noir. That mix of the super high tech and doing a movie that the style of the movie and what Spielberg does with the camera could easily have been done in the 1940s. And it's not just Spielberg doing a noir. I see this movie. It wasn't until like watching it a lot of more times and then thinking about way movies are in 2002. This is Spielberg not just doing a noir. This is him showing that he can absolutely keep up with a new breed of filmmakers that were popping up at that time. Guys like David Fincher or Darren Aronofsky and the like. And that's always been something Spielberg has been one of the best at. It shows why he's one of the greats, is that he's always able to change with the times. It's like whether or not someone loves the movie Ready Player One, I think it holds up pretty well up against other Marvel movies or like the movies of that ilk. Like to me, it shows that he's able to keep up. You look at other guys that Spielberg came up with, like Brian De Palma or Coppola or George Lucas. It's a very mixed bag as they get older, but Spielberg's able to keep up pretty well. And I'm to the point where I'm still looking forward to whatever he does next. But with Minority Report, staggering visuals on every level: cinematography, art direction, visual effects, costume design, the props themselves. You got a stellar cast, a mind-bending sci-fi mystery story that messes with my head and rips my heart out. with that scene of the potential future of Cruise's son. But the whole movie gives us this frighteningly accurate vision of the future, while also feeling like a timeless film noir. And they might make movies today that do certain elements of that, but Minority Report is one of the only movies I can think of that does all of that in one package. I think Minority Report is Spielberg's best film since Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think it's the best film of 2002. If you look at that list, there's a lot of good movies that year. And I think it's just one of the best films of the 21st century. And it gets an extra large popcorn for me.
Well, I think both of you said a lot of things that I agree with in this. And I'll say again that even though the third act of this movie doesn't work for me personally, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. This is incredibly competent. I think, Kurt, you called it out better than I ever could with how it fit a moment in time from a director who's been the marquee moment in so many times in his career. And that's amazing to sort of look at in retrospect and see. And it's chock full of good performances, a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. I mean, we've gone nearly 2 hours talking about them here, and we could go another two probably getting into all of them. And to me, that's the mark of at least an interesting movie, even if it doesn't completely land, for me. And the parts that don't land are just personal stuff that I wish would just go differently because I think it would be more fascinating to talk about. But it still works and it still looks great. And I think part of it looks great because it's mostly done the way you make movies. It's not all drawn in, it's a good mix of all the tech at the time with good old fashioned movie making. And there's something to be said for that. And it's not something you see a lot of these days that doesn't get so caught up in of itself. I think about when Bill Murray talked about Ghostbusters 2, and he said there was a moment when they took the script away from Danny, talking about Dan Aykroyd, and he said, and the movie was just gone because it just became something for the effects people and the marketing and the toy people to do. And this one doesn't hit that point, but so many of these movies do. And so I give this movie credit for that. I mean, not that you could make a play set out of this. Can you imagine the dark Lego variety of this? But they do make video games from it, and there's plenty of stuff to do from. I know the TV thing didn't work. I kind of wish they'd come back to it and try it again because I feel like it's a fertile world to explore. It would be neat to see if they could ever do that again. I'm surprised it hasn't come back up again for another adaptation because I'd be curious to see. But this one holds up just as well, even if it's just what it is. I would say this: if you haven't ever read the novella, it's a quick read. I would recommend everybody take a stab at that once. It's a different experience than this, but it's still pretty good. And as far as Philip K. Dick stuff goes, it's pretty fleshed out. Like you get a full story in it, even if you can't see a 2 hour movie in it, and there probably wasn't one. But there's enough there to play with. And there's enough here to make me say like, yeah, this is worth a shot. It's good. I'm going to join Ron in that medium popcorn, but it's that perfectly like freshly made medium for the matinee with the good butter and salt on it. It's worth it. It's totally worth it. And Kurt, I'm glad you like it as much as you do. I think that's always fun when we, watch something, see a lot of the same stuff, but we come at it from different perspectives in the end. It's not something that I outright hate. Like there's movies that we've reviewed through the years here where like when it turns for me and it just sinks the whole boat. This doesn't sink it. Like it gets a few holes in the side, but it's okay and it lives. And I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it here on Film Strip. I'm glad to talk about it with you two, gents.
Well, like I said, I feel like this movie, as popular as it might be, Spielberg and Tom Cruise, like it's not that undiscovered, but it's like whatever gets this movie out more. I always think this is one of those movies. Children of Men is another that came out like right before social media was a thing, and if this movie came out today, it would be a much bigger deal because people would be talking about political implications, the sci-fi what if implications and all that kind of stuff. Like there's so many angles to the movie besides just the basic kind of sci-fi and thriller elements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's part of the charm of this, and it's fun to go back and find things from an actor and a director who've been so prolific and have done so many seminal things, and to go like, well, they've been doing it a while. So if this is a discovery for some of the audience, then cool. I'm glad y'all were able to catch it out there with us. Of course, you can find and follow this show on social media at Film Strip Pod, where we share announcements about all the upcoming shows as well as other fun stuff that we're doing. And you can go back through our extensive archives wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple. We now have a YouTube channel. You can go check that out if that's your thing, because we are trying to get the show out there as many places as possible, except TikTok, because we're not doing that action. We're not into that. But you can find us on the Gram and on Blue Sky and on X, at Film Strip Pod, and on Facebook as well. And bonus points if you leave us a positive review, because it helps other people find the show, but it also makes us feel really good about ourselves. So until next time, for Kurt and Ron, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.